Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out this evening, and thank you especially for supporting the Koinonia Academy. Those of you who are associated with the Academy, thank you for the wonderful work you do. It was such a blessing to be able to visit the school, to judge the debate, to play a little music afterwards with some students. It was really a blessing for me to be there. And of course, it's a high honor to receive the Lumen Christi Award, and I'm very grateful for the honor that you have done me. I am enjoined by Joy to keep my remarks to 12 minutes, so I'm going to take off my watch here to keep this, by the way, for you youngsters, this is a wristwatch. Men wear them to tell time. I know you guys all tell time with these, but actually this, this wristwatch is of enormous sentimental value to me. And no matter what happens, I'm not going to give up the wristwatch, because this is the watch that my beloved late grandfather on his deathbed sold me. So I'm sticking with the wristwatch. By the way, my liberal secular colleagues at Princeton send their regards, and especially want to send their thanks to you for having me here this evening. They figure if I'm here, I can't be there. If I can't be there, then they're safe for a few hours. Let me extend my congratulations to Christiana and to Hank, and Hank, of course, to the memory of your beloved Kathy. It was just such a joy to listen to you speak and to learn about the witness and service that you have given in fulfillment of your vocation, a vocation that was shaped for Christiana by her experience as a student at Koinonia Academy, and of course a vocation that Hank and his wife lived out with such distinction, in part by serving Koinonia Academy. I'm honored to be honored with you both this evening. And Peach, thank you so much for introducing me to Koinonia Academy and having me come up to judge the debate. Alan, thank you for your leadership of the Academy and for the invitation to be here this evening. To all the faculty, God bless you for what you do. You are shaping the leaders of the church and the world for the future, and the role models that we need. And you're doing that in part by being such wonderful role models yourself. Rebecca, in the video, reminded us of that great opening sentence from the encyclical letter Fides et Ratio, Faith and Reason, of St. Pope John Paul the Great. And I'll quote the language again. Faith and reason are the two wings on which the human spirit ascends to contemplation of the truth. What a beautiful image that is. And that tells us what we as Catholics are called to hold and believe and act on when it comes to the relationship of reason and faith. And nowhere is this more important than in Catholic education. Faith and reason, strictly speaking, are not separate. They presuppose and reinforce and require each other. From a Catholic vantage point, we cannot sustain our faith without reason, nor can we sustain reason without faith. Faith and reason are the two wings on which the human spirit ascends to contemplation of the truth. Now, the little secret that I need to let you in on is that I was born and brought up in the hills of West Virginia, and as some of you who were at the school when I visited know, I play the banjo, so I've got the evidence that I grew up in the hills of West Virginia. Down there, banjos are issued to little boys at birth, and I got mine, and I learned to play it. And one of the other things we do is hunt and fish down there. Now, if you have any experience with bird hunting, and I did a good deal of it when I was a kid, what happens when you wing a bird? Are there any hunters out there? When you wing a pheasant or a ruffed grouse or a wild turkey? Well, if you just wing it, you injure one of the wings. It doesn't matter how good the other wing is, the bird is never going to get back up off the ground. It'll flap that good wing really hard, but it'll just keep going around in a circle circle like this on the ground. It won't get off the ground because both wings are required. And my friends, both of the wings of faith and reason are required if we are to contemplate the truth, if we're to get at the truth. And that means that we must never regard reason, rational inquiry, questioning, pushing, probing as a threat to faith. It's not a threat to faith. Raising questions, exposing our young people to the arguments, those that we favor and those that we don't favor, is never a threat if we educate our children to be strong, solid, critical, deep, sound thinkers. They will find their way. We as Catholics believe there is no truth that needs to be immunized from challenge. We don't need to protect our young people from arguments. We need to teach them to make and to assess arguments. And that's what Koinonia does. When I went up to judge a debate, it was a debate between two different points of view on moral questions, one of which was completely incompatible with Catholic teaching. And yet, the school didn't shield students from that point of view, or even forbid or exclude students from advocating that point of view in a debate. Why? Because we don't think there's any need to shield people from challenges to the truth. If you're doing education right, then students will find their way to the truth if you empower them with faith and reason to get there. Too often, even in good schools, not just in the woke, crazy schools that you see today, even in good schools, too often we think of education as basically two things: conveying information and teaching certain skills. Now, both of those things are important. Both of those things are valuable. We can't do without them. I do appreciate it when students in my classes at Princeton come already knowing that Lee surrendered to Grant, not to Eisenhower at Appomattox Courthouse. Knowing facts is important. And having certain skills in mathematics, in science, in literary interpretation, and so forth, that's important too. But real education is deep education. It's not just skills and information. It's what the Greeks called paideia, deep education. That is education that explores the most fundamental issues in an open-minded and serious way. After all, it's one thing, and a good thing, and a necessary thing, to know that something is the case so that you could check the right box on a multiple choice test, say an SAT or an ACT. That's good, but that's not what education is really ultimately concerned with. It's important, it's necessary, but it's not the whole picture, it's the tip of the iceberg. In addition to knowing that something is the case, knowing the truth in that sense, it's better, deeper, still more important to know why it is the case, or how it is the case, or what the deeper significance, perhaps even existential meaning of its being the case is. That's paideia. That's deep education. And that's what Koinonia Academy provides, which is why I'm so thrilled to have even a small role in advancing the interests of the school, especially by encouraging those of you who are in a position to support the work of the school to be as generous as you possibly can in doing that, especially when it comes to making it possible for families who do not have the resources on their own for a true paideia Catholic Koinonia education to get that education for their children, and especially those of you who have yourselves benefited, either yourselves personally or your children have benefited, and perhaps now they're grown up or you're grown up and you're now in a position to repay a little bit of that debt by helping other students to have access to the education provided at Koinonia Academy, please, please do it. Please make that part of your charitable work. It's so important and so necessary today. Now, I stress faith and reason as both necessary and not threats to each other. I've stressed the idea that we shouldn't shield our students from challenges to the truth, challenges to what we believe, but rather equip them to meet the challenges. I do that for a particular reason. To catechize, which is good, is not to indoctrinate, which is bad. God wants us to be people of faith. And faith is by its nature free. A coerced faith, or a faith obtained simply in ignorance, a faith that one simply inherits and does not appropriate, is not a living and true faith. God does not want automatons. God wants people who think and explore and probe and find their way to Jesus. So yes, catechize, teach the truths of the faith. Make sure that your students know what the faith teaches and why it teaches that. But don't ever confuse catechizing with indoctrinating. Let the woke, liberal, secular schools do the indoctrinating. That's what they do, believe me. That's what they do. We shouldn't be doing that. I'm probably already over my 12 minutes, but I've got to tell you a story because it is so, I think, important and compelling for us today. Some of you will be familiar with the very interesting revolt of parents going on right now across the country, a revolt against indoctrination. It's taking place at fancy, elite private schools in New York. It's taking place in public schools in places like Loudoun County, Virginia, and Dallas. What are parents in those places rebelling against? These are not Catholic schools. These are not Christian schools. These are not Christian classical schools. They're not secular classical schools. Parents are rebelling against the indoctrination that's going on. Now, I happen to have gotten to know the leader of the rebellion in New York. It's a guy named Andrew Gutman, guy who worked in the financial services industry. He's not an activist. He's not a particularly political guy. He just had a couple of daughters in a very fancy New York school, and he learned what his daughters were being, quote, taught, unquote, in the school, the way they were being indoctrinated. And he was scandalized and shocked. And so he wrote a letter that he made public criticizing the school's indoctrination of their students into woke ideology, closing off the ears of their students to any criticism of that ideology. Well, when I got to know Mr. Gutman, I asked him, well, how's it going? How's the rebellion going? Are other parents warming to what you're doing? Are they coming on board? And he said, well, a certain percentage, maybe 20% or so, of parents are not aboard because they like what the school's doing. They're with the new religion, and they want the kids to be indoctrinated in the religion. They're fine with it. I said, okay, 20%. That leaves 80%. He said, well, of the 80%, maybe half are with me 100%. They believe what I believe. The other half, so the other 40%, they really haven't yet figured out what's going on in the schools, believe it or not. They haven't yet caught on. But I think if they did catch on, they would be as scandalized and upset as we are. I said, okay, that's good. Whole cultures have been transformed by 12 guys. So if you've got 40%, I mean, you can make all the difference. But he says, no, it's more complicated than that. 40%, I said, roughly speaking, see what I see and are as upset as I am about it. But that doesn't mean they're willing to join me. Why are they not willing to join him? Here's too often what the explanation is. A lot of those parents don't want to challenge what's going on in the schools and don't even want to pull their kids out of those schools and put them in, say, Koinonia Academy, because they reason as follows. Grace Church or Dalton or Nightingale, whatever the fancy school is, has the keys to Yale, and Yale has the keys to Goldman. So if we want Junior to end up at Goldman, we have to get Junior into Yale, which means Junior has to go along with what happens at Nightingale or Grace Church or Dalton, which means I can't rock the boat if I'm the parent. Now look, whatever they're doing, we don't want to be like that. That's an example of not having your values straight. You're going to let your kid's head be filled with all sorts of nonsense. You're going to allow a so-called education, which is no more really than indoctrination, to be what your kid is subjected to, so that you can get your kid to Goldman Sachs in the end. Well, it's not getting to Goldman Sachs in the end that matters. It's getting to heaven in the end that matters. Koinonia to Jesus, Jesus to heaven. That's the track that we want to be on. But notice that that is not, at least if we Catholics are right about the way things work, that is not a recipe that even permits our leaving reason behind and just operating on faith. Because the Catholic teaching about faith is that faith is reasonable and reasoned. We have reasons for faith, and our children, our offspring, our boys and girls have to know what those reasons are. Yes, age appropriate, but I noticed you got people like Rebecca teaching logic even to our high school students, not waiting for them to get to college. We too often in this country, my experience at 36 years of teaching young men and women, is too often in this country, more often than not, we underestimate what our students are capable of. It's not that we overestimate and challenge them too much, we challenge them too little. So I applaud Koinonia for teaching things like logic and rhetoric at the school level, not waiting for that to take place in college. And we really do need it to be taught to our young men and women, because they have to understand as Catholics that our faith is a reasoned faith. There's nothing we fear from reason. We see no conflict between faith and reason. We have no fear that science will disprove the teachings of our faith. We don't believe there are two truths, the truths of faith and the truth of reason. There's one truth, and contemplation of that one truth requires both wings, faith and reason. Thank you again for this wonderful award. Mary is Mother, Jesus is Lord.